I'm going to be showing you how to crochet these sheer flowers. I'm showing you how to crochet using this yarn as well as a darker yarn so you can see a little better, and I'm going to show you how to sew them onto your project at the end. So please join me. First, I want to start by showing you the yarn that I'm using. I'm using Party Deluxe from Hobbii.com. It's Go Handmade Party Deluxe, and the color that I'm using is cream. This yarn is a fine weight yarn, super fine weight, and it does have sequins built into the yarn itself. It can be hard to find a sequin yarn, so another yarn brand that I would recommend is Cosmo Yarn from Lana Grossa. I haven't personally used this yarn before, but I do think it looks like a pretty substitute to try. To give you some reference about these flowers, I added mine to a project I made using Cotton King Sultan Pastello. The mood of the project was a 1970s gown with different applique flowers on them. In this tutorial, I'm showing you how to make the clear sheer sequined flowers. And if you're interested in the whole dress, there is a pattern available on Hobbii called the Glamour Gown. I'm going to walk you through how to crochet these sequin yarn flowers using this blue color so that you can see a little better. I've also crocheted a flower that's on the table here so you can see what we're going for. The yarn that we're using, the Party Deluxe, is super thin and fine weight, so it might be a little hard to see. I'm also going to follow up with crocheting the same flower using this yarn that's on the table. To get started, I'm going to be using a slightly oversized crochet hook here. I'm using a 6.5 millimeter for this yarn, and you can see it a little better with the loops that are going to be created. When you attach the yarn, you're going to just want to make a circle. So I'm going to do that by chaining 3 and slip stitching into the first chain space. You can choose to also do a magic ring here. Either way is fine. You're just creating a small hole that we're going to be working the flower petals into. I have a small hole here created from chaining 3 and joining them. I'm just going to be chaining 10 chains. You can manipulate the length of the chains to make a shorter or longer petal as desired. So I have 10 chains, and I'm going to be working into that loop that I created to bring the yarn through for a slip stitch. This creates the first flower petal of 10 chain stitches. I'm going to repeat this process 4 more times to create 5 petals. I'm simply chaining 10, and once I have 10 chained, I'm just joining the yarn into the loop that I created at the beginning. I'm just pulling up for a slip stitch here. I now have 2 petals created. I'm going to continue this process until I have 5 flower petals. At the point where I'm joining my last petal here, you can fan out the loops to see how the petals look. They're quite flimsy just because the nature of this yarn, but when you sew it onto your project as an applique, you can manipulate the petals to create which shape you like. I'm cutting a yarn tail here that I'm just going to hide in to the finished work. And before I put this down, I'm going to close the working stitch so that this doesn't come unraveled. Stretching out the 5 petals, you can see how pretty and delicate this flower is with the sequined yarn. When you sew it onto the project, you can easily shape the petals as you go. I'm going to work the flower pattern again using a thicker yarn, just as an example, in case you can see this better. I need to start by chaining 3 and slipping into the first stitch to create a loop. You can choose to do a magic ring here if desired, but I'm creating a loop to work my petals into. I'm going to be chaining 10 to create the petal loop. At the point where I have 10 chains, I'm going to work into that very first loop, working a slip stitch into this whole space that I created. I'm just going to close with a slip stitch to create the first petal. I now have 1 petal created. I'm going to do this again, showing you this time with only a shorter amount of chains. I'm going to create a second petal here just so you can get an idea of working a different amount of chains, make smaller or larger petals. I'm going to pull that out and resume with the 10 chains that I'm working for this flower. After I have 10 chains, I can slip stitch into that very first hole that we created. And by working a slip stitch into that hole, I am creating the second petal. I now have 2 petals created on this flower. I'm going to chain 10 again for the third flower petal. I'm going to repeat this process around until I have 5 petals created. You can choose to add fewer or more petals to your flower as desired. Adding these flowers to your next project, you might find it helpful to use stitch markers to hold them in place. What I've done here for my project is actually put them on the project while it's laid flat, and then I put the project on me so I could see where the flowers sit. I found this helpful when it came to positioning the flowers. When it comes to sewing the flowers on, I'm going to use the same yarn so that way there's not a thread that's visible. In order to do this, I thread the needle by bending the yarn in half. By folding it, you can easily thread it onto the needle. Actually sew it onto the work, you're going to need to use your tapestry needle, and you're going to be bringing the thread through both the flower and the stitch from your project. To do this, I like to come from up underneath the work, and I'm just picking up a stitch from the project and going through the chain from the flower. There might be a little tugging involved because the sequins sometimes do get stuck. It's very easy to manipulate the shape of the flower as you like it, because as you go, you just use your finger to hold it in place and you're just doing one stitch at a time. I like to work through each chain here because the flower should be flush when you're wearing it. If it picks up, it could get snagged on something, so you do take the time to work through each chain of the flower. Thanks so much for watching. You can find more of these videos on my playlist. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that little notification bell for more.